Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Appalachian Gaming Professors. I'm one part of your two-part duo, Justin, and this is my co-host, the Ellie to my Joel, the boy to my father, the Clem to my Lee. But we interchange. It's not supposed to be weird, I promise. Jeff, say howdy.
Ho!
On today's episode, a literary one, we'll be discussing Cormac McCarthy's The Road, as part of our 3-week segment on the relationships in post-apocalyptic. And as always, our podcast is out to
discuss, analyze, and criticize games, literature, and film.
But first, we're going to move into our first weekly segment, which is
Weekly Nerd Talk.
So what have you been doing this week?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting week for me. Went back to school this week. I finished doing my syllabi. Went back to school. I'm teaching a course on ancient literature through the Renaissance. We're starting our course out with epic literature. So I started my course out with the Epic of Gilgamesh, an old Sumerian epic. It's actually the first time that I've ever read it.
Is that like the Odyssey?
No, it predates the Odyssey by thousands of years.
That was supposed to be a joke.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest surviving texts that have went down through time.
Isn't it actually the oldest novel? I guess structured story.
Yeah, it's written on stone tablets. It was actually lost for thousands of years from the ancient Romans up to the 19th century. And I found out it was rediscovered in the 19th century, which is pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
Lots of interesting stuff in the Epic of Gilgamesh. There's a flood narrative very similar to Noah's flood. We can assume maybe that Moses, when writing Genesis, might have been influenced by that.
You're treading on dangerous water here, friend.
Well, I mean, beyond the divine inspiration argument, we can always assume there's similar, different cultures, even Asian cultures, like sacred texts, have very similar passages. So maybe they were just different passages or different cultures who came to the same ideas.
So have you been doing anything else?
I'm preparing for next week. I'm teaching the Iliad next week. So have you ever read the Iliad before?
No.
I know we read the Odyssey.
We read that in high school.
Yeah, so the Iliad is, of course, the Homer's epic of the Trojan War. All picks up because one stupid dude named Paris, 3 goddesses came to him and said, which one of us, is the hottest goddess? Hera.
This is like a really bad plot for a dirty movie.
Yeah, Hera, Zeus's wife, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and Aphrodite, of course, being a blue-blooded man. I don't know what the term is, blue-blooded, red-blooded. Being a man who likes to eat steak, Paris chooses Aphrodite, and as a result, Aphrodite gives him as a gift Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in the world, who so happens to be married to a Greek. And
Trojan horses happen.
Yeah, I'm teaching that this week. That should be fun.
You had any time to do anything else? Like watch anything, play anything?
I've almost finished watching Iron Fist. I've got very close to the ending of it. It got halted because of some internet snafu, but haven't really played too many games this week. Yeah, I've just, it's been mostly a work week. I'm also trying to get back into my dissertation again, since that's my main job this year.
I guess that is important.
I can tell our podcast viewers what that is later. I'm not going to bore them with details right now.
Well, some of these people might be interested in that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can do a month on medicine and games. I don't know if there's...
Sure, we can talk about the doctor skill in Fallout.
Yeah. What about yourself? What have you been doing?
I've been working on a podcast and reading The Road most of the week. I did listen to some podcasts on my own time. I listened to an episode of Judge John Hodgman. That was pretty good. What else did I do? Not really much of anything. I caught up on all my anime, so there's that. I'm trying to think if I actually watched something this week. I don't think I did. I haven't really had time.
Yeah, it's funny how the week flies by in a blink of an eye, but some weeks drag and some weeks go nonstop. I am looking forward to a couple of games that are getting ready to come out, though. I think I mentioned last week I'm going to try Yakuza Kiwami out soon, which is a remake of the first Yakuza. And that comes out the 28th of August, I think. And the new XCOM 2 expansion is also coming out soon.
I bet you're excited about that one.
Yeah, I'm glad that I haven't gotten too far into XCOM 2 yet, because this expansion completely rehauls the game pretty much. It's a $40 expansion, and it's going to completely...
Jesus, that's a lot for expansion.
Yeah, it's a $40 expansion. It's going to completely add new mechanics, new classes. It seems like it's going to be worth it. I trust my man, Jake Solomon, and that Fire Axis, to do well by me for that one. So
yeah. I did want to play PUBG this week. I did get to play that one night, but I haven't got to play since. And since I'm not going to be as busy this week, I'm definitely going to play some of that.
Yeah, I watched one of my old students. Shout out to Kevin. Kevin is an avid PUBG player. Actually,
what's his Twitch handle?
His Twitch handle is NudeCop69. So give him a shout.
That's really classy.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
Yeah, you drop down on the battlefield.
Yeah, and then it's basically about resource management and a little bit of stroke of luck, but mostly skill.
Finally, the sole survivor at the end.
Yeah, the battleground kind of collapses.
Yeah, Kevin actually got to the very end of the game.
Chicken dinner.
Yeah, I rewarded him with a $5 Twitch donation, which when he gets $5, he chugs a beer in one gulp.
What a day and age we live in.
I know. I should put that on my teaching philosophy, that I'm that great of a teacher to support my students. So shout out to you, Kevin.
Good job, Kevin.
Yeah.
You're making us proud.
We love you, Kevin.
I've also been wanting to catch up on all the GTA RP that I watch online. It's always a good time, but I haven't had time, so...
Tell us a little bit about that. You mentioned it to me before.
What GTA RP is it's basically these people who play Grand Theft Auto, but they play on what's called an RP server.
So you're talking about the single player and not Grand Theft Auto Online, right?
Correct. It has nothing really to do with online, but the servers are modified to where people can basically connect. And it's like, I guess it would run kind of like the way the online servers run, but they're hosted by somebody and you connect to them directly. I think all the online servers are peer-to-peer. But anyways.
So you can just role play Trevor as a
a
traffic cop or something.
That's kind of like if you're in a real community, then you have to have a actual original character and everything. But if that's what you wanted to do, you wanted to play a Trevor-esque character, then you could. I don't think they let you use the model, but there's several different models to choose from.
So to do this, you create a character?
Well, usually the way people start is they'll come up with a concept for a character the same way you would if you were playing Dungeons and Dragons, okay?
Right.
And once you have your concept down, you log into the server, assuming you've gotten whitelisted and everything, all the technical stuff you've applied, they've approved you, whatever. And then, after you're logged into the server, you create your character. You give it the model that you want it to have. It can be basically any ethnicity that's in the Grand Theft Auto base files. You can have any hairstyle. It's very customizable. And then you can dress it however you want. And you go around and other people have voice chat as well, and you talk to them and engage, and you use the resources found within the Grand Theft Auto 5 world. So the vehicles, all of that stuff. Now, this gets kind of deep because you might think that's going to be total bedlam, right? Okay, so there's people that are actually cops on these servers. They go around and they Mirandize you if they have to arrest you. You can get arrested. You can get put in jail, which is not nearly as long as the penalties are by minutes. A minute is a year. And It gets pretty intense. There's like even dispatchers in this stuff.
So I don't think I haven't heard about anything like this on the console version. Is this just a PC thing?
Yeah, it's PC only.
Okay.
Console wouldn't be able to do it. Basically, it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend that if you're interested in it, you go check out Djibouti Dubs. They made like the ShamWow videos and like the all the spoofs and like the cartoon dub spoofs and stuff. You know who I'm talking about?
I do not.
And like the old woman with the sticky buddy. They did like infomercial spoofs. But anyways, they role play 3 nights out of the week. They're actually really, really funny at it and good.
Yeah, I actually haven't ever completed the campaign of Grand Theft Auto 5.
It's a good game. You should probably play it sometime. At least the single player is good. It's pretty well written.
Yeah, like back in the PlayStation 2 era with Vice City and San Andreas, I never really liked those games.
Things have changed.
Yeah.
Things have changed a lot. They have like a fully functioning, all-encompassing story of brotherhood and friendship and betrayal. And
I played probably the first 5 hours of it. I really liked Franklin, and then I got to...
it's kind of got like a Sopranos feel to it.
Yeah, I got to the bit where you're like chasing down the one dude's car on the highway. You remember what I'm talking about?
Mm-mm. No, there's several missions.
Yeah, you have to like jump to the other car.
Okay, I know which one you're talking about now.
Yeah, that's pretty much as far as I got.
That's when like him and Michael are chasing after a guy.
Right, Michael's his name, right?
Yeah. I remember that. That's a decent mission.
Yeah, I was really enjoying it, but you know how things go. You get busy.
Yeah.
A game like that, you got to stick with it.
Yeah, that game is like, if you take your time, it's pretty long. I mean, really, overall this week, I haven't had time to do anything. It sounds like you've been busy at work, which you can talk about your literature stuff because it applies to us, but all I've done is...
Well, you read The Road. That's a...
yeah, I did read The Road, which that's part of this segment that's coming up. If we want to go ahead and jump into that.
Let's talk about Cormac McCarthy's The Road, then. To give a little background on Mr. Cormac McCarthy... Also, my interests with Cormac McCarthy. I mentioned last week that I have an article coming out in a book soon discussing Cormac McCarthy's The Road in conjunction with The Last of Us. Almost a scholar of him at this point. McCarthy started his career out as mostly an Appalachian writer, so he definitely fits within
our themes,
our podcast.
Yeah, where's he originally from?
He's from the Knoxville, Tennessee area originally. So, how everybody in southern West Virginia loves to go to Dollywood every year. Well, Mr. Cormac McCarthy, one of our greatest living writers.
A little bit of trivia for you there.
Grew up in that area, so the next time you go to Dollywood, and you ride the boats or whatever the hell it is you do at Dollywood these days. I went... just as an aside, I've bungee jumped at Dollywood before. That was fun.
Okay.
Yeah. The Comedy Barn.
You're getting way too excited about Dollywood. We need to get back on Cormac here.
Yeah. The Comedy Barn is some good stuff. Some nice lowbrow humor. Nothing like it. So but Mr. McCarthy is from there. The first few novels he wrote, sort of take place in that area. He's known for several early novels. Child of God is a novel about, a serial murderer in the Knoxville, Tennessee area, the Gatlinburg area. He eats people, so...
It seems to be a recurring thing with him.
Yeah. They made a really bad movie about it last year. James Franco did it. That's something I can go on a whole rant about, how much I can't stand James Franco, but I digress.
Yeah.
He's one of those people who thinks that...
this is the podcast where we're going to trash James Franco every episode.
What the heck? Why not?
We'll have to work that in as a running joke.
Yeah, but long story short... I digress, but long story short, James Franco, tried to act like he was a graduate student in English. He went to Columbia. He never showed up to any of his classes. And he got a C in his classes there, I think. I think he got a professor fired there because that professor dared to give James Franco a C. Of course, a C in graduate school is pretty much like failing. Yeah, funny story, when I was at Ohio University working on my master's, James Franco actually applied to the program there. Yeah, so
you have a lot of animosity towards James Franco.
Yeah, it was a running joke about James Franco teaching an English 101 class and having all the, the ugly-eyed college freshman girls wanting to sign up to his class. Needless to say, James did not come to Ohio University. But James sabotages all the authors that I love. Cormac McCarthy, John Steinbeck, William Faulkner. He makes really bad movies, about all the guys in my wheelhouse, so. But
no hard feelings, yeah. James.
Yeah, James, this is a scholarly podcast. I'm going to be very polite. Yeah, but I do not have very nice things to say about you. If I saw you on the street, I would give you a nod. That'd be about it. You wouldn't get a, hey, how you doing? But anyway, McCarthy's known for several of those works, like Child of God. Suttree is another one. Suttree is a novel that sort of plays with form. It's a hard book to explain. The plot. I would need to review it. It's been several years. I'm not as interested in his Appalachian fiction as I am his Western fiction. In 1985, McCarthy wrote what I think is probably one of the greatest books in American literature, which is Blood Meridian, The Evening Redness of the West.
I think most people have heard of Blood Meridian.
Yeah, it's a very difficult novel. It's very challenging. It's historical fiction, taking place in, during the Mexican War, right after the Mexican War is over. A gang runs loose, through the frontier, rape, murder, pillage. The book isn't very pleasant.
Is there cannibals?
Pretty sure there's one somewhere.
There always has to be.
Yeah, but it's a very interesting book, very philosophical. The judge, is an antagonist, and he's one of the most diabolical villains in literature, I think. I have a blast teaching that novel. I've taught it twice now. The students always sort of drag through it, and then when they get to the end, it all comes as a great epiphany on what the book was actually about. So that's his masterpiece. Some people think The Road is his masterpiece. This is just all aesthetic opinion, of course. But I kind of disagree. I'm more of a Blood Meridian guy. But after Blood Meridian, wrote a trilogy of books called the Border Trilogy. The first book is called All the Pretty Horses. I think that book won the National Book Award. It's All the Pretty Horses is like a love story, as only Cormac McCarthy could write a love story.
Well, Cormac has an issue writing female characters. So.
Yeah, that's one of the laments waged against him. I don't think Blood Meridian if it did have women, she was definitely marginalized.
Yeah. He's not what you'd say a feminist writer at all.
Yeah, he acknowledges that. Yeah, he writes what he knows, right? We can talk about male writers, as a whole. There's a movement in the academy to get some of these male writers out, and to bring in more women writers, bring in more writers of color, more ethnicities. I think that's great. I know in my own work, I tend to read the dusty old men too much. I don't read enough women writers. That's definitely a weakness of mine.
Got to go read you some Harry Potter.
Yeah. Good old Harry. Yeah, Miss Rawling. All the Pretty Horses is a really tragically told love story. It'll break your heart. They made a really bad movie about it with Billy Bob Thornton. Billy Bob Thornton directed it and had Penelope Cruz as the love interest. I can't remember who played them. John Grady Cole, the main character. Yeah, but it's a wonderful book. It'll break your heart.
I've got a question. Do you like any of Cormac McCarthy's based movies?
I love No Country for Old Men.
Okay.
The Coen brothers.
Good job, Coen brothers. You got Jeffrey's seal of approval.
The Crossing is the second book of the Border trilogy. I'll be honest, I've never finished The Crossing. It's a wonderfully written book. It's really tragic and depressing. Most of the time I struggle with tragic and depressing existential crises in my life anyway. So maybe I'll get back to it eventually. The third book of that trilogy is called Cities on the Plain. John Grady Cole and the guy from The Crossing get together and do something in that book. I haven't read that book either, to be honest. And then after that, McCarthy moved into some novels we're probably more familiar with. He did No Country for Old Men, which the Coen brothers made a film of.
Good job, Coen brothers.
Yeah, he actually wrote that as a screenplay way early. So the Coen brothers really didn't have to do
Good job, Coen brothers.
Yeah, I mean, they pretty much just adapted it, straight out of the text. There's not too many differences. Wonderfully done movie. And then The Road, which we're going to talk about today.
How do you feel about that movie, Jeffrey?
That movie is awful. Yeah, we can talk about that in a few. He did a play sort of thing called The Sunset Limited, and the HBO did that. It's pretty much just two guys chatting at a table about philosophical themes.
Man, that sounds like me and you.
Yeah, the two guys were Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel L. Jackson. So it sounds like something we need to watch.
Yeah, it does.
And then, most recently, Cormac tried his hand at screenwriting. He's a very reclusive man anyway, but he tried to do his hand at screenwriting with The Counselor. Ridley Scott was the director and had a ton of great actors and had Cameron Diaz, Brad Pitt, Michael Fassbender. That movie was a train wreck, and that was mostly in part because of Cormac's writing. I'm gonna be honest.
He's not very adaptable to screen.
You went to see this film, and these characters are talking in this stilted philosophical language, and I remember when I went to go watch it, everybody in the audience was just scratching their heads, what the hell am I watching? It had some really misogynistically written women, and that was a flop for Mr. McCarthy. I think most Cormac scholars would agree. He's working on another novel now. He's getting up there in age. He's in his 80s. He's working on another novel now called The Passenger, and it's going to be due out next year. I think 2018 is the to be determined on that. It's a very illustrious career. I think 100 years from now, McCarthy is probably going to be regarded as one of our greatest novelists of the 20th and 21st centuries. Yeah, he's inspired by the likes of William Faulkner. William Faulkner is one of the heavy inspirations, for McCarthy's work, mostly with Faulkner's long sentence structures, vocabulary and diction. He's inspired by James Joyce, who wrote Ulysses. Of course, James Joyce was a very experimental modernist writer in the early 20th century. He's inspired by Southern traditions, the British tradition, definitely the modernist tradition. Do you want to talk about just really quickly your first experience in reading Cormac McCarthy?
He really loves adjectives a lot.
Okay.
And
so we're talking pretty much about the way he writes, his sentence structure, his form.
Yeah. He really likes adjectives. He likes short sentences, chained off like a machine gun about these little scenes, and he paints portraits forever. But his portrayals are very, very good.
Talking about those sort of short sentences, one of the things that my students often have a hard time wrapping their minds with McCarthy is the fact he doesn't use quotation marks.
No, he doesn't use quotation marks at all. Dialogue is straight up back and forth, read as just stated sentences.
What do you think about that?
Oh, I thought it was a good style.
Yeah, I think
you can get lost sometimes if you're reading a little too fast about who's saying what, but if you just go back and take your time, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think Oprah asked McCarthy why he did that. It was in another video besides the one I showed you.
We watched a Oprah interview. Links will be on the website once we have the website up to the interview of Cormac McCarthy before the podcast, just for reference.
Yeah, but Oprah asked him, why do you not like to use these quotation marks? He said, I don't know. They just look like little ugly lines on the page. Yeah, they just distract me.
With his style,
right.
There's no need for him. There's not. It's just the way his pacing is done and the way that his characters interact back and forth, there's no need for quotations.
Yeah, and even McCarthy sort of takes inspiration from other writers who have done that kind of thing in the past. Hemingway, is well known for not doing that as well. His story, A Clean, Well-Lighted Place, is a masterwork and not being able to tell who's speaking, trying to figure that out.
Maybe we should give them a paragraph by him just to give a demonstration of how he writes.
Yeah, so this is just a random passage I found in the novel when the father and the son are talking, just to sort of imagine what this looks like on the text. It's no quotation marks, no indication. The boy said, the father said. But just to read a brief passage. Can we have a fire? The boy said. That's the only time you get an indication. We don't have a lighter. The boy looked away. I'm sorry, I dropped it. I didn't want to tell you. That's okay. I'll find us some flint. I've been looking, and we've still got the little bottle of gasoline. Okay. Are you very cold? I'm okay. The boy laid with his head on the man's lap. After a while, he said, they're going to kill these people, aren't they? Yes. Why do they have to do that? I don't know. Are they going to eat them? I don't know. They're going to eat them, aren't they? Yes. We couldn't help dream them because they'd eat us too. Yes. And that's why we couldn't help them. Yes. Okay. So, of course, I'm reading that exaggeratedly, but you sort of get an idea as far as...
That is definitely him straight up.
That his style, a very minimalistic dialogue. We talked a little bit last week, even with Last of Us, and we talked about how the directors of that game were inspired by No Country for Old Men. That game didn't have any music in it, partly because that the makers of the movie, the Coen brothers, put very little music.
Good job, Coen brothers.
Sort of echoing McCarthy's emptiness in the words, in music in the scenes. McCarthy's also sort of well known for his diction. He's been compared to... Have you read Moby Dick?
Nope, but I have a copy.
Yeah, I think that's the case for most people. We have a copy on our bookshelves. I can say that I've read it. McCarthy's been compared to Melville with sort of his biblical prose, very Old Testament sort of word choice. I don't know if you got that sense.
A bit inspired by archaic terms,
right,
but not necessarily biblical, at least to me.
You can probably make that case for several Southern writers, like William Faulkner's been compared to biblical for the same reasons for his prose. But he's well known for that as well. McCarthy is not an easy, light pulp read.
No, it took me probably over a day just to get used to his style.
When I taught my course on American horror and popular culture, we read several writers. We read Poe, we read Lovecraft, Flannery O'Connor. None of those writers are slouches. I pretty much used McCarthy to sort of show this is high literary culture. This isn't your Twilight read, right, or your Harry Potter read. It's this is literature. Right? So I pretty much used the book to differentiate that high art, low art distinction. Again, like we talked about last week, that's sort of a place of snobbery, but there's also some merit in that as well.
Well, I think that Harry Potter's literary genius.
Well, I'm sure that I'm going to become a villain if anybody listens to this podcast after that. So you will be the liked one. So congratulations.
What do you think about old Tolkien?
Well, I mean, Tolkien has a reputation for being more literary, mostly because of his, allusions to old Anglo-Saxon poetry. So that is one reason why Tolkien, I think, is more respected as far as being good literature. A lot of my colleagues out there, they think Harry is the next coming of William Shakespeare. I knew one guy, I can't even remember his name now. He taught an entire Comp 101 class where they did all 7 Harry books. I don't know what you talk about every day. Harry put his magic cape on and found out some bad stuff was happening. Some of the wizards are racist, right? Yeah, we can talk about that with but
okay, you done trashing Harry Potter?
You see what I mean? Harry's pretty. Some of the stuff's pretty obvious.
Let's get back to Cormac.
I still love Harry. I've read all those books like 3 times. Would I call it literature? No. It doesn't have to be high literature, right? I love horror movies. I love westerns. All this stuff doesn't have to be highly elevated. It's still part of our culture. But Cormac is definitely that high culture that...
I would argue that Cormac is not easily accessible to people who do not have great comprehension skills in interpretation. Because there is a lot of scenes throughout the road that if you're not really paying attention to what every word means, you're going to miss out on a lot. And it's not denotation that you have to worry about, it's the connotation.
Yeah, I can't imagine as a teacher teaching any of McCarthy's works to secondary high school students. I think it would probably go over a lot of those kinds of students' heads.
Yeah, definitely.
If I can see the reaction parents might have to the charred baby, smoking on the spit.
Yeah, those dark scenes.
Yeah, so I'd like to do that at our old high school. They'd have a petition for your head, probably. It's a challenge enough teaching him the college students. I can speak to that.
Cormac has these little areas where he just slightly foreshadows. It's just slight. And if you're paying attention, you're like, oh, that's why he said that. But he is the master of foreshadowing.
I would agree with that. Yeah, so that's a little bit about McCarthy's style. If that kind of thing sounds appealing to you, go for it. Of course, there's lots of parodies of his style as well.
So if somebody is interested in McCormack, which novel should they start with?
This one, The Road, is often... So let's talk about this really quick. The Road, is often seen as one of McCarthy's most accessible works.
Mm-hmm.
It's seen as, here's a way of opening high literature, so to speak, open up to the general public. This novel went on Oprah's show, because I love Oprah. She tries to get people to read good stuff. But it went on her show, whereas I couldn't imagine Blood Meridian going on that show. What do you think? Do you think this book could be accessible to a general audience?
To be honest,
it's about a father and a son, right? So a lot of people can relate to that.
Could relate, but the writing itself, I think, would be somewhat of a barrier to a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, like I said,
it's just you have to have a solid foundation in understanding prose.
Right.
It's just... And you got to be able to interpret words for more than what their definitions are.
It takes a degree of patience to get through McCarthy's work as well.
Which, I enjoyed it. But am I going to go recommend it to everybody?
It's not for everybody.
Yeah, I don't. A lot of people that would probably be interested in it, I'm not even sure if they can make it through it.
Yeah, I know, speaking from my own experience as a reader, my first McCarthy work was Blood Meridian. which is probably arguably one of his hardest. I read that book for the first time as a junior in college.
But all of that said, Jeffrey, while I'm thinking about it, it's a rewarding read if you get through it.
Right.
And if you can interpret a scene and figure out exactly what he's conveying and put it into the grand scheme of the story, it's very rewarding.
Yeah, Blood Meridian is one of those novels. I read it for the first time. It just completely blew my freaking mind. It's just one of those life-changing books.
Like Harry Potter?
Yeah, like Harry Potter for most of the general population. Yeah, I love you all. I'm a muggle.
All right, let's go ahead and actually start talking about the road itself.
But before we do that, if I had to recommend a book to start with, it would probably be either this one, No Country for Old Men, or if you're in the mood for a tragic romance, All the Pretty Horses. So, talking about the themes of the novel now, right?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so I've taught this novel before. There's several themes that we can start with. Yeah, I think a good one to pick up with first, is the question of the landscape in the novel.
Should we go over a summary just a little bit first?
Well,
just general summary.
General summary. There's something tragic has happened to the world.
Not explained.
An apocalypse of some sorts has happened. Landscape is completely gray and bleak and cold.
Resources are scarce. Nothing can really grow. Animals are mutated if they exist. Most are extinct now.
There's been some commentary that maybe it's a nuclear commentary of sorts.
Yeah, like a fallout.
Right. We don't have any real clue as to what caused this. It's pretty much about a father and a son. They start the book out one place. They try to they have hope that if they go to the ocean, things will get better, that they will discover good people. Sort of
an unfounded hope, but he is desperate.
Right. That's a theme in many sort of post-apocalyptic narratives, like Last of Us last week. Sort of that, hopefully we'll go here and things will get better.
True. And I think we covered that pretty well last week.
That's pretty much
that's
the main
really
gist.
It. I mean, that's as far as plot goes. They walk across the countryside into the desolate wasteland, and they go to the beach.
And lots of isolated incidents along the way,
which we'll discuss. All right, we can get in things now.
Yeah. So one thing that, like I mentioned, that we can talk about is the theme of the environment. This book has been read as a tale of ecological destruction, almost like an ecological parable of sorts. If we keep going on the same path that we're going on as far as treating the environment with little to no care, of course we can maybe mention even in our current political climate, the attitude is almost, screw the environment. Let's get rid of the Environmental Protection Agency. Let's cut back on all these regulations. Some people in our neck of the woods think that's the most wonderful thing in the world. I, on the other hand, don't really think it's that great of an idea.
Yeah, I don't want lead in my drinking water.
Right? It's a terrible problem. I mean, like even, we can speak being in Appalachia, but I know that throughout most of my life living here, I've never gotten water out of the kitchen tap to drink. I've bought bottled water because that stuff's bad, out of the rivers here. And of course, there's the whole incident in Charleston last year. That's basically one way that we can read this novel is, a tale of environmental catastrophe. One thing to mention about the environmental way of reading literature, and it's really in vogue right now. It's called ecocriticism, for those of you who might not know. I'm not an eco-critic by profession. It's pretty much a way of reading literature as a means of environmental advocacy. So if we read literature, hopefully we can gain some sort of lesson out of it. Or maybe we can change somebody's mind out there about how they perceive, nature and the environment.
Best of luck to everybody out there reading stories to coal miners trying to change their minds.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think it's going to be easy.
now I know, speaking from my own experience, I've always been passionate about nature and the environment. The whole activism angle, that's ecocriticism. That's mainly one of the main reasons why I don't practice it. I've just never really bought into the fact I'm going to change anybody's mind. I might change 10, 20 people's mind. Maybe that's enough in my courses, right?
I'd rather preach facts, but I mean, it is what it is.
Well, I mean, if you talk about a work of literature, you can bring in facts, with it. Of course, we know that's just liberal indoctrination, right? Compared to The Last of Us, even at least, The Last of Us had a very lush, natural green landscape. The problem in The Last of Us certainly wasn't. I mean, there was this whole thing turning people into zombies, but nature as a whole seemed rather untarnished in that game.
Comparatively, it's a whole different landscape.
So talking about nature in the novel, if we were prioritizing the father-son dynamic as the main theme of the novel, we might not think about the nature aspect too much, but just for the sake of...
think of it this way. Cormac McCarthy spends probably the first 30 pages of the novel describing the landscape in great detail.
Right.
So it is definitely a part of it, and it's definitely to be analyzed.
What do you think? You're fresh off of a reading of the novel. Do you find that there's some sort of nature, environmental commentary of sorts?
Maybe somewhat, but I think it's definitely there. But I think it's kind of secondary to the main message of the story itself.
So you kind of agree with the Colin Moriarty analysis that character is the main central concern, and not...
Definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just to be fair to all of my fellow scholars, there have been several critiques to that effect. One, I was surveying some of the literature before this podcast. One of them talked about McCarthy's using the desert as a constant motif. Of course, the desert is a constant motif in Blood Meridian. This is almost it's not a desert per se, but the whole world's a desert.
Yeah.
This book.
It's a wasteland.
Right.
It's a wasteland covered in ash.
Whether this comes from nuclear catastrophe or global warming or what have you, the novel's been read in all those
you
different
could even
ways.
Argue that it's an astronomical event. Like maybe the sun had an issue or something. There are so many ways you could interpret what happened.
It's like what happened to the dinosaurs, right? Of course, we know those dinosaurs didn't exist. The world was created in 7 days.
Devil's out there burying their bones.
Right. Yeah. So, but alas, we digress. Yeah. So, if you read this novel, if you haven't read it before, think about that. What is going on with nature? Is McCarthy making a commentary of some sorts? Several great Western writers take this theme up quite a bit. Steinbeck does, Edward Abbey. McCarthy is one in a long line of tradition. As far as that goes, I trust you're mostly interested in character. How was your experience in reading with this father-son dynamic, especially after we got that first relationship last week between Joel and Ellie?
You can definitely tell that there's parallels sometimes, but they are two separate, distinct set of characters.
One's a surrogate father with a girl or a teenage girl, and the other one is a father with a young boy. We have that gender difference for sure. What distinctions do you think exist?
Well, I thought the relationship between, if you want to link them more so than anything, here was my thoughts. The son is basically a seed of hope to the father. He's taking him, he's hoping that he's going to prosper and live. It's basically the whole, everybody that has a child would understand that. I think the same thing can be said of Ellie. She's a hope, literally.
Right.
And then if you want to go even further, then you could say that Ellie and Joel, their relationship is almost the same as the boy and the father's. But I wouldn't argue that it's quite the same. Mainly because the boy has known his father since he was born. They're more intimate.
Right.
Ellie and Joel don't have that level, at least not till much later in the game.
Yeah, of course, the novel McCarthy was supposedly inspired to write the novel because, he himself had a child late in life. I think he was in his 60s when he first had his boy, and that supposedly lent inspiration to him to write this story of a man and a son. He told Oprah as much.
I did put one note down in my notes that might be relevant to this. My note reads as, "The son is a seed of hope. The father is a gardener of life. The mother," which, the mother that they introduced, "is the dead soil in which the father is trying to raise this seed. She is the hardship that they're facing within the world." Ellie and Joel, if you say that Sarah is the same, the world itself, then did the father's past despair for his wife affect the same way Joel's daughter's life affected him? If Sarah and the mother both represent the world itself and its hard truths, is this analogy not a direct link between the father and Joel?
So you're saying that Sarah from The Last of Us,
his daughter that passed away, she could be basically, when she passes away, is representative of the hardship that they're going to come to face, because the world is it's flipped upside down. Whereas the mother in the novel, same thing. She couldn't adapt. She committed suicide. She left him.
Right.
And she's representative of the hardship overall.
And she just sort of stoically said, I'm not going to do this.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a nice parallel. Yeah,
that was about the most direct connection I could make, because it involves a relationship of three separate characters, and there is a direct dynamic that seems like it's inspired by.
Yeah, the connections that I made in my article that's going to soon come out, one of them I talked about was how The Last of Us took inspiration from The Road, in the sense that in The Road there's several instances where you have, sublime little moments that the characters enjoy, even in this ruthless world. Really early in the novel, there was a nice instance where they go to a waterfall. Of course, that's freezing cold water. The whole world is probably 20 or 30 degrees. The father, really early on, just lets the boy go for a swim. McCarthy describes even how in this depraved world, the waterfall is still, a beautiful thing. And he goes for a swim. It's a nice little moment. That's one of the moments I mentioned in comparison with The Last of Us. Talking about like that giraffe scene, right? Sort of that enjoying the sublimity of nature, even in this ruthless world. I don't know if you saw something.
It's a break from hardship.
Right.
My thing about those scenes is where he's swimming so much. He swims like maybe 2 times. I know maybe 3 in the novel. It's like, you're going to give your child hypothermia and pneumonia. Get him out of the cold.
You literalist, you.
I was like, that's what I was thinking the whole time. Like, man, this is going to turn into something bad.
Doesn't seem like the best idea. I'm reading here, the boy is so thin that it stopped the father's heart, and yet he's putting him in a river.
Yeah, like, McCarthy is, like, he is explaining how cold it is the whole entire time as well. So, I don't know.
Nice little moment, a nice little bonding moment between the father and the son.
I kind of liked it when they went back to the house early on, his old house that he grew up in. He's trying to explain concepts to him that he would never understand.
That whole thing with concepts, this is another question that I have down in my notes. So in The Last of Us, we had something going on with Ellie, and how she tried to piece together the ideology of the now dead, defunct culture, through like comic books, through games that she sees.
And constantly pestering Joel with questions.
Yeah, constantly pestering him with questions. That sort of thing is happening in The Last of Us as well, or not The Last of Us, but The Road as well, with the father and the son.
Yeah.
Right? On page 53, 1 into 54, nice passage to sort of illuminate this idea. He used a deck of cards he found in a bureau drawer in a house, and the cards were worn and spindled, and the 2 of clubs was missing, but still they played sometimes by firelight wrapped in their blankets. He tried to remember the rules of childhood games. Old Maid, some version of whist. He was sure he had them mostly wrong, and he made up new games and gave them new names. Abnormal fescue or cat barf. Sometimes the child would ask him questions about the world that for him was not even a memory. He thought hard how to answer. There is no past. What would you like? But he stopped making things up because those things were not true either, and the telling made him feel bad. The child had his own fantasies, how things would be in the South, other children. He tried to keep a rein on this, but his heart was not in it. Whose would be?
I think it speaks a lot to the fact that the boy, he's innocent, and his ignorance is displaying that innocence in full. It's an interesting dynamic between the two.
Yeah, and this whole sort of vision of the ideological fantasy, how being blind, to how the world really is, having a fantasy version of it, right?
Does that make you happier? I mean,
well, this is a good chance to bring up some philosophy. That's why I dug this old philosophy book out. But Plato had what you call the Allegory of the Cave. There's actually a nice article, a Cormac McCarthy scholar done. Carol Judge is her name. I was reading this earlier. Are you familiar with Allegory of the Cave?
Yes.
For those of you who might not know, it's epistemological way, sort of vision of how we know things. People were chained up in a cave. Of course, the cave doesn't have too much light. They're chained up. They see shadows on the walls. They think those shadows are real. But one day a man breaks out of the cave. He sees the light at the end of the tunnel. He goes outside. He's completely overwhelmed by all the light that he sees. Eventually, things become clear to him. He goes back inside the cave. He finds that he now knows nothing. His worldview is completely different from the people still chained up in the cave. Those people now think he knows nothing about the world, when in fact he knows everything about the world. So Carol Judge even sort of makes mention, the fact of the pun, right? The boy is named the Sun, and the sun is what, the literal sun is what is missing here. In the text. You get where I'm going here?
Yes.
Yeah, so...
yeah. That's a little strong-handed, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a clever argument.
Yeah, that is clever.
Yeah, so the sun is definitely missing here in the novel. Of course, the father has been exposed.
It's not, I don't think it's... light is explained, like the lighting conditions of the day, but the sun is never mentioned directly once, as far as I remember.
So that child is still chained up in the cave, whereas the father has been outside the cave. He knows how the world really is, whereas the child...
That makes sense, yeah.
The child is still blinded. Yeah, I read that argument. I was like, that's a good way of thinking about the novel. The literal... heavy-handed pun. Maybe McCarthy was up to something there. Yeah, I think we're discovering, though, that this is a constant motif in post-apocalyptic fiction like this. Always a character that's unaware of the world for how it was before, and they have composed their own sort of ideological fantasies.
Yeah, every one of the main characters, Ellie, definitely, is the same way. Even Clem in The Walking Dead, she's the same way.
Yeah, this is something we'll definitely have to look out for next week with The Walking Dead. Yeah. If I remember right, she's a young child at the beginning of the incident. She probably has some memories, but
she doesn't quite comprehend what's going on.
Right.
And Lee has to explain the hard truth there.
Yeah, so this sort of thing is almost a nice sort of mirror back on our own culture, right? Just because this character who has no awareness of this culture looks at it with these fresh set of eyes. It sort of gives us some insights as far as even some critiques of our culture. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
Just the purpose of having those incidents in the first place. Yeah, and do you think it is better to be stuck in the cave, or is that
well? If you argue it that
light?
way, I mean, it's kind of pointless either way.
Right.
So who knows? I mean, it's up to individual interpretation.
Would you rather be stuck in the cave, or would you rather go into the light?
I think I would rather be in the light in this context, because he at least got to see the world before. I mean, he knows. Whereas the boy, he just can only imagine. But maybe he's happy with his delusions.
Do you think most people are stuck in the cave?
Absolutely.
Right. As far as we can make a whole political aside here, if we so chose, we will spare you of their diatribes or Jeremiah. Interesting questions. Would you rather be is ignorance bliss?
But really, the father is perpetuating his ignorance all throughout the novel. He wants him to stay ignorant of a lot of things. He wants to shield his eyes from a lot of atrocity as well.
Well, the father does simplify lots of ideas, right? The whole, we're good guys, they're bad guys, right? Talking about all the other people. I know you made some mention in your notes about how you found that sort of labeling.
It's pointless. I mean, when you're in that state of the world, who can really make morality judgments when you're trying to survive? Because humanity itself isn't really a thing anymore. You're basically animals.
Right.
You've lost your humanity.
Well, I mean, the father is still trying to hold on to that humanity. Like, he doesn't want to eat other people. He doesn't want to kill if he can help it.
But let's assume that it's us. Who can say how things would turn out? You always have to try to put yourself in that position, or people that you know.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, depends who you are. You might try to stick to your moral code, even in a situation like that. Whether that would help you survive or not is a different story. I don't think everybody out there would abandon their moral compass.
I think a lot would. I'd argue they would.
A lot would, but not everyone, right?
People are selfish by nature.
Well, I mean, 90% of people, 95 even, probably would. And maybe I have more hope in humanity than you do.
And then, people would say something, but they don't know until they're experiencing it firsthand. That's kind of more of my point than anything.
Right. You want to explain what you mean there?
Oh, I can read my note if you want me to do that.
Sure.
Okay. So my note is as follows, and it's a bit lengthy. The bad guys, the predatory, the rapists, as the wife called them, the cannibals, they are the representation of base human instinct without reserve. What separates the good from the bad? Is it a true sense of morality, or is it one's own strength, balanced with the ability to sleep at night after committing such horror? Are they no longer human? Is it acceptable as a member of the world to really label as such? Has not humanity been rendered from every soul? Is there still such a thing as morality in this wasteland, when there is no society to reinforce it? Are us as readers biased and ill-informed?
Well, I mean, I think McCarthy's answer to that question is definitely yes, right? That he uses that motif throughout the book. The father and the son are carrying the fire. So even if everyone else in the world has abandoned a moral compass, moral sense of code, those two still at least carry something, some kind of beacon of light with them. Right? True,
that separates them, but I guess in the end, it does help out the son, but it doesn't really help out the father.
Well, I mean, the father's dying throughout the whole book. That's something we failed to mention in the plot summary. He's a lot of folks in good old Appalachia. He suffers from black lung throughout the novel. So breathing too much ash.
I continued. Are us as readers biased and ill-informed on how we ourselves would actually learn to survive, taking the fact that this story is about a father willing to take the life of his own son at any moment in order to give him the mercy from reality? Is this human? Is it somewhat human? But doesn't it seem like it's a shell of what a human actually is? A creator, a consumer, and a taker of life balanced into one being? These are all interesting thoughts sparked by McCarthy's portrayal of the bad. For saying they are bad is only a convenience set forth by the Father to pass on to his Son the values of humanity's long lost. For the Son himself is a spark of hope that a world of better would come about. He is the Father's goodness, his seed of hope that the world isn't fully lost. But it seems ultimately, no matter how hard he fights it, it is. This is what good guys do, he said. They keep trying. They don't give up.
There's that passage that I read early in the novel from last week. Father says if he, the Son, is not the Word of God, God never spoke. It depends how much agency you put in that sort of love, I suppose, between Father and Son.
I really do believe that there is a point to your argument that they are striving to keep their humanity, and that's what keeps them good. Because the rest of the bad, they
let's talk about some of the bad.
They consume their own children.
Yeah, there's a baby over the spit. We're getting the sense like there's sex slavery kind of stuff happening.
There's a scene in a basement of a luxury home that they go into. They don't know it's actually occupied by the bad guys, and they come before they actually arrive, and they're trying to plunder the place, basically. Then they run into the basement, and they get to scare their lives.
Yeah, describe that.
There's naked bodies. They're huddled up against the wall. There is a man who has lost his limbs. Obviously, they've been chopped off and consumed, is what is implied. And these people are begging for their lives. They're wretched. They're basically ghouls of what they become. And then, as soon as the Father says that, it's, let's get the hell out of here, boy. So that's what they do. And then the bad people come along, and the Father really can't leave the area at the time. They're just too winded and weak. They're on the verge of starvation. So they bed down by a tree, and they hear the screams and the torment of those people that night.
Father has a line in there somewhere. It says he tells the boy to close his eyes when they discover one of those sites. He says, just remember that the things you put into your head are there forever. Close your eyes. It won't be a traumatic memory in your consciousness. Whether or not we can say that's good parenting or not, maybe the child should face that harsh trauma. It's a very human thing to do. You don't want to protect them from it as well.
Yeah, you can really make the argument that he should, because it's about survival. But if you're going to lose your humanity at the cost of survival, is it worth it?
Right. And that sort of theme, that's actually titled my essay, that. Just remember the things you put into your head are there forever. The influence of the road on the last of us. That same sort of thing happens with Ellie in the game, too. Even though she is sort of hardened. She's
a very, compared to most people in these types of stories, she's very hardened at the beginning.
Yeah, but that same idea still sticks. Maybe more so with the kid, since he's a lot younger, presumably.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the great line there, whether it is a good thing to live in ignorance again, or live in the cave, or go outside the cave. What about dreams in the novel? That's something else that we can...
There's probably about, I don't know how many, because I didn't count, but there is a handful of dreams.
McCarthy definitely gets inspiration
some of them,
from that.
Yeah, some of them are like directly described. Others are implied. The boy's dreams, he really only describes one that I can recall, and that was the one about the wind-up penguin. Oh, he also describes the one where his father wasn't breathing.
Right.
Because he was afraid of losing his father. But the father has a lot of dreams, and they're mostly revolving around his
death.
His death, or the death of his wife. Early on in the novel, he dreams more so about his wife. I guess because things are a little bit more hopeful then. As the novel progresses, they face more and more hopelessness.
Yeah, of course, later in the novel, the kid has a dream that's really bad and wakes him up, and he's crying. And the father tells him, happy dreams are a sign that you've given up.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if I quite agree with that one. And he even questions himself on that one later. He wonders if that was the right thing to tell him, because he's so tormented by when he sleeps every night. He doesn't want to have a good dream. But that goes back to, what are you willing to do for survival?
And the dreams in McCarthy are a pretty common motif. Yeah, No Country for Old Men. Have you ever seen the movie? If not, even if you haven't read
No.
the book. Yeah, the movie ends with the main character talking about his dream, and then he gets done talking about his dream, and then the movie ends. And the reaction was like, "What the hell was that?" Dreams are a common sort of motif with McCarthy as well.
I thought the dreams were well done. They really added dynamic to the characters. It gave them a chance to bond a lot, and it helped them establish a dialogue and him to really understand what his son was feeling in the face of atrocity. It's a good touch. Even like the dreams about him, his wife and stuff. I mean, that adds a lot of background information and makes the narrative a much more powerful one.
You just want to spend a minute or two talking about the wife as a character in this book. It's fresher on your mind.
So basically, the wife, she bailed out on them. She was hopeless. In the beginning, there is a part, and this goes back to McCarthy's foreshadowing. The event has happened. The world is at its state. It's at the very beginning. Everything's starting to break down, and the husband, the father, he's a man obviously of preparedness. Throughout the novel, you see that. Like he's always prepared. You could even, if you wanted to really overanalyze it, you could say that he's probably military or something.
Right.
But she and him are having this dialogue, and he goes into the bathroom to run water and fill up the tub. She asks him, "Why are you taking a bath?" Oblivious to the fact that he's running water for potable water. It's about survival. And then less than 2 pages later, after this foreshadowing, of course, you get the story about how she ultimately committed suicide. She wanted to take death as her lover because she couldn't do it anymore. She said that she knew that the boy was basically his hope. That would be the only thing keeping him from bailing out as well. And that she knew that he couldn't do it without him, at least. And probably couldn't do it without her. She was kind of a bitch, to be honest. She really was. And like
Do you think McCarthy's being fair to women here? Or is this more along the lines of he can't write women well?
Honestly, Jeffrey, I think it's later. I mean, I can criticize him on that because she's using words like she has a whorish heart,
right,
and everything else. I would say he's not being very fair,
right?
Because
you could easily write.
He's portraying the stereotype that they're weak.
Yeah, you could easily write this the other way, where it's the mother with the son or something like that, if you wanted to.
You could, and you could even argue, if you really want to, that she's the strongest of all because she was able to actually pull the trigger.
Yeah, I mean that's
and she wanted to take the boy with her.
Yeah, I mean, talking about suicide, that goes back to like the ancient Romans.
I don't really agree with that, but you could argue it.
Yeah, the whole Stoic vision of suicide, where if your life loses dignity, why keep going, right?
That's exactly what she was.
And the Romans celebrated that. Like if a politician, for instance, lost favor, they would go cut their wrists in the bathtub. That would be, they would lose their life with dignity instead of facing shame, humiliation.
But like I was saying much earlier, she's basically representative of everything that they're going to suffer. Even the boy, he'll refer back to her sometimes. He wants to know exactly where she's went. Because he eventually is at peace and he doesn't bring her up anymore. I think he understands.
Yeah, I think that Gwyneth Paltrow plays her in the movie. Yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow got the easiest movie role ever. Getting to play that character in the movie. I remember that when the movie came out, she was billed as like one of the top actors, and she's in it for like
the most interesting thing about that character is the dialogue that they had during her playing up that she's going to go kill herself and the husband's begged her not to. That was a lot of dialogue for McCarthy. He's not big on like long pages of dialogue, and I think that one lasted like 2 pages. And I mean, it was well done, especially the analogy of taking death as her lover and how death could give her more than he ever could.
I think McCarthy's had a failed marriage somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like when George Lucas did the second Indiana Jones, and it was just like the most dark thing ever.
The Temple of Doom.
Yeah. And you could tell that he was going through something. That's kind of what you get from McCarthy sometimes when women are involved.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
That's most of my notes as far as the novel goes. Is there anything that I haven't mentioned that you found interesting?
We didn't talk about the fire.
Yeah, the carrying the fire. Well, we mentioned it, but we didn't go into depth.
I mean, it's like the most central theme in the book. So
yeah, the fire is also a common motif in McCarthy. Let me read to you really quick the ending of No Country for Old Men. I got it out because fire has relevance here as well. So No Country for Old Men, it's the book right before The Road, but it's a Western story about a sheriff. He struggles with like how society is disintegrating amidst, declining morals and such. And it's about this unstoppable, omnipotent force of evil, named Anton Chigurh. And the sheriff can't defeat Chigurh. Chigurh wins in the end. Evil wins. The bad guy beats the good guy, so to speak.
I just think that we can make a parallel with the ending of this novel, and as you said earlier, it's ambiguous. It's not this happy ending that some people would comprehend it to be. Did evil win? Well, we don't know about this one, but
in the end of No Country for Old Men, the sheriff has this dream. Like I said, it's the dream that when people saw the movie the first time, they were up in arms about it. This is often read by McCarthy scholars as a prelude almost to The Road. I thought about him a lot less than I should have, and I know that ain't right either. I had 2 dreams about him after he died. I don't remember the first one all that well, but it was about meeting him in town somewheres, and he gave me some money, and I think I lost it. But the second one, it was like we was both back in older times when I was on horseback going through the mountains of a night, going through this pass in the mountains. It was cold, and there was snow on the ground, and he rode past me, and he kept on going. Never said nothing. He just rode on past, and he had this blanket wrapped around him, and he had his head down. And when he rode past, I seen he was carrying fire and a horn, the way people used to do, and I could see the horn from the light inside of it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead, and that he was fixing to make a fire somewhere out there in all that dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he would be there. And then I woke up.
That's almost a road. Like,
right.
There's a path there. It's actually a pass and everything in the novel.
I know.
Yeah, I think he kind of referenced back to his work for thematic purposes there. But it's even the same. Like, the fire within the novel is mostly the representation of the drive for them to keep going. And I made an argument in my notes that you could even go as far as to say that it's a duality, that it's hope and it's death all in one. It's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, that, of course, the sheriff gives up in No Country for Old Men. He submits, he retires because he knows he can't control evil, so to speak. But he still carries that fire, sort of like how Boy and the father do.
Yeah.
Of course, there's that whole bit at the end when the father dies. The boy asks the random guy, "Are you carrying the fire?" I guess so, but I guess so.
He has no idea what's going on. He just kind of... that's another...
It's a powerful symbol,
Yeah,
though.
it is a powerful symbol. Do you want me to read my note about it?
Sure.
Okay. So I said, packing fire, or carrying the fire, because it's referenced as both throughout the novel, is a theme presented during times of trial by survival especially. When things look dire... It's the ultimate get-out-of-free gel in every sense. Ultimately implies that the fire, you could even say they're the bullets that the father has kept, he has 2 bullets, can be used to take their life if need be, the most presented example being if they were captured by cannibals. Duo takes comfort in this, and only the wretched and the desperate could fully understand. But it's not the bullets themselves, it's the drive, a drive to keep going or a drive to end it. Or is it the father's hope entirely? It could be argued either way. It's implied in different contexts, so it could be a duality. Fire warms and could be a catalyst of life, but it also destroys. When they hit the beach, the fire has shifted from being a means to deal with the worst and a hope and drive to survive. Is it still bullets? The 2 bullets that the father carried since the start? When the boy wonders if there's another duo across the sea looking back, fire in tow, is he referring to hope or death? It's implied in both ways in this segment. Are they carrying fire too, he says? We don't know, so we have to be vigilant. Is McCarthy saying that if there is another duo, it would be okay for ours to perish since hope remains still? Or are they saying they must survive because the other duo may be out to harm them? Is the fire hope and death on the same coin, but with different sides? Fire in itself is symbolic of drive, but are we being driven to death or renewal? Duality is all around this concept, even in the fact that the boy refers to another duo.
Yeah, for your notes, put my thoughts towards like even 2001, The Space Odyssey. It's at the very beginning of that. Pretty much the cavemen discover fire, aliens, show them. Yeah, so that mention of fire as our drive, and whether that's a good thing or
a bad thing. It can lead to death, or it can lead to hope. I think McCarthy did a very good job of portraying that throughout the novel, because there's a lot of scenes where the fire is referred into a hopeless context, and then there's scenes, especially at the end, when it's referred into a more of a very hopeful context. It's a very powerful symbol, as you said.
Yeah. Like I said, people left No Country for Old Men after that passage. They had no idea. Everybody left the theater in an uproar. But
no, that's a good scene. I like that scene.
It's beautifully.
Yeah.
It gives me chills every time I read it, especially reading it aloud. Yeah, the book my essay is actually going to be in. It's called Carrying the Fire, the influence of McCarthy on popular culture.
Now that I'm thinking about it, and I linked it too, we were talking about what's the difference between the bad and the good. The good carry the fire.
Right. Yeah, that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And the bad have nothing to stand on, just their own, surviving. And
I also think that answers the question, if you're going to take your child's life so he's not raped and cannibalized, basically, the fire, the will to do it, that probably makes you better for it than worse, even though it's a terrible action.
Yeah, of course, the father doesn't do that at the end.
Nope, he doesn't have to. He thought he was going to have to there for a while, but he doesn't have to. They actually came close a few times. He tried to train the boy how to do it himself, but nonetheless.
So do you think, so now we're talking about the ending. Did you read the ending as being hopeful with the boy, or did you?
As we discussed this before the podcast for full disclosure. And you kind of swayed me. At first, on the surface, it appears like it's a good ending. But if you're paying attention, there's a lot of things that are just blank. It's ambiguous, as you said. Like, for example, the man tells him that he has children. There's no children that appear when he goes back to wherever they're living at. It could be implied that, they're getting ready to eat him.
It seems very swashbuckly.
Yeah, there's no, you could say that is his happy ending, but it's not clearly
full disclosure. The road, the film, paints it as very happy. Like there's puppies.
There's literally a dog.
Yeah,
there's the children that were mentioned but never appear in the novel, and unicorns are flying over the moon.
Very nice looking woman for the apocalypse.
Yeah, I kind of got a little miffed with that scene too when you showed me. It's not true to the work.
Yeah,
they pulled some Kubrick on that.
I've been to some Cormac McCarthy conferences, and a lot of people really love that movie. I just never have gotten why. Just because it completely butchered McCarthy's ambiguity. Of course, ambiguity is a high literary trait too. We end on that. The child is adopted, whether he's going to be eaten or not.
And the wife talks to him about God, and he wants to talk to his father about God because he believes that his father's watching over him.
Then the book ends on this wonderful passage describing nature. You want to try to figure out what's going on with
that was above my head. You're going to have to explain it.
Yeah, it's the very last passage of the road. McCarthy ends the novel. Once there were brook trout in the streams in the mountains. You could see them standing in the amber current where the white edges of their fins wimpled softly in the flow. They smelled of moss in your hand, polished and muscular and torsional. On their backs were vermiculate patterns that were maps of the world and its becoming, maps and mazes of a thing which could not be put back, not be made right again. In the deep glens where they lived, all things were older than man, and they hummed of mystery.
The only thing that I can take from that is the fact that they were using a map throughout their journey, and it relates back. And that, like civilization will never go back to what it was. That's the only thing I can take from it. But I didn't really get that language. I'm not that versed.
Well, I think you're onto something, just talking about like civilization and how it's not going to be put back. Maybe if McCarthy's directly addressing the reader, maybe your map of the world might not be put back, so to speak, after reading this book.
Let's give a little bit of context. There is a map that they carry throughout the journey, and the map is an old map that they got from a gas station, and it's slowly but surely tattering apart even more. They have taken crayon and marked the corners and numbered them so they know how to put it back in order. It's pretty central to a theme because the boy and the father often bond over it, and the father's like, "You're always saying that we've went farther than we have," and he'll point out where they are on the map. And it's just representative that the boy he keeps hoping that he's ahead of where he is, but he's not. And the father always brings it back into reality for him.
Yeah, and even on a dream level, like the maps and mazes, not being able to put it back, that's almost like a symbol of subconscious as well. I don't know if you buy into that. I'm trying to understand
that one is so far up for interpretation. I mean,
it's a beautiful way to end the book.
It's a good usage of words. It invokes a very good scene of it's a sort of
trout. After reading the whole book about Ashen Wasteland, it's a nice sort of,
and that's like one of the most green scenes, I guess you would say, in the whole entire novel, and it's the very last one. But it's really up for interpretation. That scene is just it's a good way to end the book, but I don't know if most people are going to really take something away from it. It's hard to comprehend.
There's definitely nothing like that in the movie.
No.
The book.
It just abruptly ends with a picture of a puppy on a beach.
Yeah, happy music.
Yeah. And a sexy lady talking down to you.
Yeah.
Surprised she didn't pop out her cleavage. It was so happy.
Yes.
And you got your new friends and your brother and sister over there to play with.
They could have sung "The Kid's a Jolly Good Fellow."
Yeah, it's ridiculously happy. After, and we got to put this in context. In the novel, they move away from his dad's body. When in the movie, they're standing there beside his dad's body having a good celebration.
Yeah. Get the fireworks out. Dad's dead. You're with us now.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous.
I always appreciate endings like that, or endings like the way McCarthy wrote it. I always hate when film or adaptations changes the ending. I know, just as a brief aside here, we recently went to go watch our friends at Concord University do King Lear.
Mm-hmm.
The 18th century just could not handle how nihilistic and dark the 17th century were. They were good. They were good Christian guys.
Monastery people.
Yeah. They just could not handle like Shakespeare and his darkness. So they changed the ending of King Lear around where like Lord Lear and Cordelia are like having a dance off at the end.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm not even kidding you. Yeah, so
I want to read that version sometime.
Yeah, it's Nahum Tate was the author, and he completely rewrote King Lear to make it a happy ending. So that's sort of what the road film felt like.
Yeah, definitely. Felt like to me. Definitely, it's a whole other vibe. But we could sit here all night and tackle the themes in this book because there's so many. I mean, I have like 5 more on this in these notes that we could talk about. This would have to be a 2-parter, really.
Yeah, and like even the scholarship on this book, like this is by far, even though it's the newest book, it's by far one of the most widely discussed books, even in the critical literature surrounding McCarthy. This and Blood Meridian, those are the 2 most widely discussed ones.
So final thoughts.
I've spoken for myself. I know I've told the audience about my passion for McCarthy's works. And like I said, I've gone to several conferences. Part of that, even the community of scholars. What are your thoughts on McCarthy? Do you want to read more after this?
If I was in the mood for McCarthy, I would have no problem reading more.
Right.
It would be something I took my time with. I did this in a week.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's mostly the past 2 days is when I really had time to do it. And today I read for 8 hours. So, not the best experience for McCarthy. If you take your time, you'd probably enjoy him a lot more.
Right.
That said, I thought it was a well-done novel. The start, if you've never read McCarthy before,
be patient.
Yeah, because he's kind of slow about setting things up, and he paints that landscape for over 30 pages. In fact, I didn't really start to get into the book until they went into the father's old house, and then it gets even more landscape painting after that. So I like that part, and then the part that really got me is when they went down into that basement and found those people. I was like, man, that's metal. That's some dark crap right there. It's interesting too. So that got me, and then I was hooked on it.
Right. So that was over 100 pages.
Yeah. But McCarthy, he's more about prose, as you said.
Right.
It's more
it's very poetic, his prose.
If you're reading McCarthy, it's more about interpretation and the prose of it. It's not so much about the plot. It's about the relationships and the ideas that they can spark within your own mind. It's a rewarding read.
Right. You get something out of it.
But Jeffrey, am I going to recommend it to everybody?
Not everyone.
No. I would say most of the people that would tune in our podcast right now probably
would probably appreciate it, maybe.
I think it depends. Like if you're more on the gamer side and you're not you're
on
more
the literary side.
Yeah, then you wouldn't want to read it. But if you are more like you're tuning in to us to listen to us ramble on about meaning and stuff, then yes, you probably should read it.
I think it's a mixed audience we have right now, probably half and half even. Some of them might be more interested in games. Yeah. Some of them might be more interested in literature.
Which, not to get too far off subject, but that's one of the reasons we've been labeling what kind of podcast it is in the introduction. This week it was literary. Next week it will be a game-focused podcast.
So you just want to talk really quick about what we're going to be doing next week?
Okay, so next week we're going to be covering Season 1 of The Walking Dead.
Not the TV show.
No, the game by Telltale. And we'll be analyzing mostly on Clem and Lee's relationship because that's basically our theme so far. Clem and Lee are basically more akin to Ellie and Joel than the father and the...
Maybe the road has
But
something.
Every one of these, the main male older man is basically taking on a surrogate father type relationship. It's a good game.
I think I felt more upset about Lee than I did the father in the road, as sad as that is to say.
I did too, because Lee's death is just tragic.
Right.
It is. I mean, the father's slowly dying, and
McCarthy prepares you for it.
Yeah. Lee, however, has done his best for this little girl, and he's just kind of screwed over for it.
I will be...
Very selfless man, Lee.
I will be preparing for that by putting myself through that tragic game.
It's again. A rewarding play, though. And then we should probably also go over the fact that we don't have our website set up yet. I'm hoping to have that done by, unless you're listening to it on the website now, then you're in the future. Hello from the past. But right now, the website,
darkness, my old friend,
has an update. It's in the works. This is our first time tackling a major project, and there's a lot of resources and stuff that's taking place, and there's a lot of effort.
So tell us what's happening with getting it up on podcast services.
Okay, so right now we have to get us a media host. After that, we'll get our feed. And after we have a feed, we can start submitting it to the podcasting services. iTunes actually has an approval system. It takes about 3 days to get through that. I don't think we'll have a problem.
We're pretty much doing these episodes with the assumption people will probably listen to the first 5 or 6 of them later.
Yeah. We're not really expecting a big base right now.
Right.
So that's the note on that.
We're going to start ending in our shows with a segment, just a sort of final thought segment, and we're gonna, we ragged on poetry a little last week.
Yeah, I was gonna go into that. You said, what was it? Some poetry, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe. Well, it only lasted 1 episode. We're doing poetry almost every single episode now, or it'll be a quotation, but mostly poetry.
Yeah. So, considering the themes that we just talked about with McCarthy, I thought that I would read William Butler Yeats's poem called Sailing to Byzantium. In the first line, you'll see what McCarthy had read the thing. Okay. Sailing to Byzantium by William Butler Yeats, a great modernist poet. That is no country for old men. The young in one another's arms, birds in the trees, those dying generations at their song, the salmon falls, the mackerel crowded seas, fish, flesh, or fowl commend all summer long whatever is begotten, born, and dies. Caught in that sensual music, all neglect monuments of unaging intellect. An aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress. Nor is there singing school but studying monuments of its own magnificence. And therefore I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium. All sages standing in God's holy fire, as in the gold mosaic of a wall, come from the holy fire, Pern and Agyra, and be the singing masters of my soul. Consume my heart away, sick with desire and fastened to a dying animal, it knows not what it is, and gather me into the artifice of eternity. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make of hammered gold and gold enameling to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a golden bough to sing the lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past, or passing, or to come.